Happy Monday, everybody. All right, I've got Amelia Parker, at-large City Council Seat 3, sitting in today. As usual, I have no idea what I'm planning on talking about, but I'm going to talk to her about baseball for sure. Number of shootings that have happened over the last couple days, which is a very frightening trend so far this year that I'm not too excited about. So maybe we'll talk about that and some of the solutions the city and KPD are working on to try to alleviate this growing concern. We are almost in agreement at gmail.com, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Help us out, tell your friends about us, see what we can do about growing this base so we can just keep spreading information. It's all about knowledge, education, learning, understanding what's going on around us in a little bit more of a long-form interview, so you get to know the people, the things, the stuff, the who's, the where's, the what's, and all that jazz. So that's what we do, and here comes Amelia Parker, everybody. Appreciate your time, and thanks for listening. And like I said, Amelia Parker, everybody. Councilwoman Parker is at-large Seat C, which I guess the letter is just because there's 3 at-larges. Is that correct for the city? Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, and so at large, so again, a lot of the show is structure. It's trying to understand how the structures work. As a county resident, I've gotten much deeper in the county commission, what's going on with them, and the county commission has 9 districts and 2 at-larges, and the city has 3 at-larges.
3 at-larges, 6 districts.
6 districts, so it's 9 total.
Exactly.
Okay, and so. We were talking a little bit getting started, and so one of the things for me that I'm really trying to wrap my head around as the deeper I get into this, and you being my first city person to try to understand some of the structures and stuff, is there a specific, when you started in 2019, you were elected in that year and took office. Is there anything specifically that the city does that the county doesn't, that you got, because I know the city does the beer board and stuff like that. But because I was looking through your last agenda, and a lot of it's kind of rezoning stuff, which is a lot of the same thing the commission does. Big chunks of it are rezoning, property use kind of stuff like that. But is there anything specifically that you feel like the city does separate from how the county does it that maybe most of us don't really kind of pay attention to? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. There are a lot of ways that I could approach that question. So you tell me if I'm getting at it,
okay.
How you're getting to ask the question.
Sure.
But your question, what it made me think of was one of the reasons why I ran for office. And one of the reasons why I ran for office in the city. And that's because I believe in terms of our city structure, in terms of how city council and the mayor's office interact. I think that some changes are needed, and I think that we could learn some things from county commission structure and how they run their meetings. Right. In terms of the issues that we are responsible for throughout the city and county, there's a lot of overlap. County primarily focusing on residents, businesses, land issues outside of the city limits.
Right.
And city focusing, within our city limits. When the county and city were divided into 2 separate governments, there was an agreement that allowed schools to remain, the county health department to be under county responsibility. And so city has very limited role when it comes to public health issues, public education, etc. But there is some overlap. So I'm curious a little bit more about your question about that structure and the differences.
Okay, so full disclosure on me, everybody, my regular listeners know that I've been, I won't say pushing the Metro idea, but at least trying to explore the idea of Knoxville going Metro. Personally, I believe that it's an inevitability it's a when, not if kind of conversation.
Mhm.
Especially I had Larson in here from the commission, and we were talking about the planning board or whomever is estimating Knox County at least adding 200,000+ people over the next 10 years, and so like that kind of conversation is really curious to me because like again that's one of the things to me. It's like we have a lot of bodies that run through both city and county, the school being the easy one, but we have separate law enforcement kind of thing. Those kind of and so it's like to me it's an efficiency of government kind of conversation, trying to understand. I guess not to put this in a disparaging way, it's not my intent at all, but like what is the value gained by having a separate government in the city versus the county government controlling the whole thing? That kind of stuff. It's just for me, it's more of an exploration of the idea, trying to get the conversation in the air so that we're not, 5-10 years down the road and it's like we got to do this. This is getting out of control, kind of thing. Same thing with like the baseball thing, trying to stay ahead of this conversation because these are the kind of things that all of a sudden it's happening, and that reaction to it in the short term tends to not kind of be as well explored, and all the different ways to do things don't have the time to be investigated, and it's just like, oh, we got to do it now. And so the Metro is kind of one of my ideas on that. And so again, it's just trying to understand, because I had Courtney Durrett, who's County Commission District 2, which like 90% of her district is in the city. And so trying to understand what she does for her commission seat versus I think that's District 5 area. I'm not sure on the city part of it, but I believe she told me that there are 2 different city districts that split her commission district. And so like, again, just trying to understand, again, it's weird for me in this conversation because I'm not a city resident. My backyard line is a city line, but if I'm a county resident or a city resident, when I have an issue, who do I go to about different things? And so like, again, trying to understand where the divides are between the city and county government for a constituent to understand where they need to go with an issue is kind of what I'm after. And so again, not that big a deal. It's just one of those things that it's an idea I'm exploring on and stuff like that. And so we touched on baseball a little bit. You were my favorite in the baseball meeting because you were the only one really pushing actual issues in conversation. It seemed to be very, what's the word I'm looking for from that meeting? Passive, maybe for the most part of everybody there. There were a few other people that had some pretty good questions. I think it was, Councilman Smith was asking about the terms, and I thought that was an important thing to put up, the terms of how long Major League Baseball gives the Smokies and the term of the lease we're looking at. And so watching you and talking and following this thing specifically is I feel like there's almost an inevitability to what's happening. It seems to be more of a conversation of how, not what. Like it feels to me like we are doing this. It's really an argument about how. Is that off base, or do you feel the same, or do you feel like, what's your feelings on?
Well, one thing I would caution the public with is that this is kind of a typical strategy of elected officials to make the public feel as if it's a done deal so they won't fight for something else.
Right.
To make the public feel like they're late to the conversation so that they can, push back on the public's request for any sort of workshops or public forums or that type of thing. It's also, if we watch the conversation regarding the development out off of Chapman Highway by the Boyds, I don't know if you watched any of that conversation. But it was very similar to what we're seeing now, where there was a strong push for, development to move forward. The land was being cleared and the community felt like things were moving forward. But not necessarily, right? And so that's how I feel about the baseball stadium is that the public shouldn't be discouraged if they're not happy with how elected officials are proposing to spend their tax dollars, should continue to speak up and help make the arguments for why they feel this is not a good deal for Knoxville.
Right, because that's the one thing I've it's been a lot easier to find opponents to the idea than it is people to actually give me a sales pitch for why it's a good idea. I am working on a few people that are part like Mamontov and some of that team. I'm trying to get some scheduling situated to get them down and help me walk through some of the finer details of the proposal and stuff like that. But it doesn't seem like there's. I don't think I can find anybody that says no, I don't want a stadium. I think everybody wants the stadium. It's the how, whether we're paying for it or the Boyd pays for it on his own kind of thing. But I haven't really heard a good pitch, because a really good sales pitch on what this does for me as a resident positively. Yes, I might use it for entertainment factor, but I'll use it for entertainment factor whether Boyd owns it or the city owns it. So that doesn't, that's not a factor on it. So because again, it doesn't make sense to me, the tax revenue part of the conversation. It's like, well, this piece of this chunk of the old city isn't generating any revenue. Okay, but we're going to put it in a special tax district where all the revenue it generates goes to pay for itself. So it still doesn't generate. It still doesn't generate anything. So what's the only value is the intangibles that we can't really. Right. We're just guessing at that point. Is it going to do more business in the rest of the old city? Is it going to bring other things downtown? Maybe. And that's. Is it
to attract and keep our local young talent? That has been thrown out there, but I've seen a lot of arguments against whether young folks are attracted to, baseball as a form of entertainment.
Right.
So that.
I think the one thing for me, really, the one thing that I think I would get the most value out personally, and I guess I'm in between young and middle age or whatever, would be festival concert stuff. Like that's the one thing I think for whatever reason we stopped doing concerts at World's Fair Park on the lawn, other than the 4th of July. Like that's the one thing I really miss is having a good outdoor venue. I think the baseball could fill that bill, and I think it would be extra cool where they're proposing it to have an outdoor venue, because then you go from there into the old city or into Market Square or into the other things around there before and after the event and make a whole night of it instead of having last concert I went to, I go down to Atlanta for a show at like Stone Mountain or something like that. It's like, you don't go hang out afterwards, you drive all the way back home. And so I think that would be a cool thing in that. So I appreciate your demands in that meeting for further information, trying to understand the financing and trying to make sure it's clear to everybody how this is going to work. Because if I wasn't doing this show, from what I've seen in coverage, I don't think I would understand that it's a net zero in tax revenue. And
for the next 3 years.
Yeah, and so and that's assuming that they're there the whole time, and that's the other big problem to me. And so, I don't know. I the more it's funny though. Like my initial gut reaction when this thing came up was like, no, this is a bad idea. And the more I get into it, the more I waffle back and forth.
Well, to your point, I haven't heard that positive argument. The argument that tells us what the benefits are for the community, except for, potential revenue in 30 years that we would likely have to spend on renovating this 30-year-old stadium.
Right.
And it's similar to, World's Fair Park. Spent so much money on that area. We even renovated recently, right? And used to have outdoor festivals there. Flooding was an issue. Parking was an issue. And so now have our sights on a new potential outdoor area, but no plans to fix the flooding at World's Fair Park, continue to use it as an outdoor venue. There's sound issues with the amphitheater. I was hoping there would be some renovations to that so that we could have more concerts at the amphitheater on World's Fair Park. Reason why we don't is because of the acoustics and it's really bad there.
Right.
So that we have amazing spaces that if we renovate them, if we fix them, if we respond to the reasons why the community is not using them as much, it would be much cheaper than entering into a 30-year bond for a baseball stadium, in my opinion.
I tend to agree with you on that for sure, because I think it's I think the most telling thing about it is when Boyd says it's not the right financial decision for them, then how is it the right financial decision for us? I mean, that doesn't make sense. If you don't think it is in and of itself is profitable, with the way an individual and an organization like the Boyd Group does, if it doesn't look profitable to you, how does it? I mean, we I don't know. That one drives me crazy about it because like I said, the further I get into it, the more I go back to my original. But it's still, there is a lot to it. I think there could be, like, it's like a signature value. It's like a stamp on the city. Like a lot of cities have kind of a signature spot, a thing about them. We have our, we have the Sun Sphere. Every like profile of Knoxville, we always see the Sun Sphere in it. And, a cool baseball stadium venue like that could be another landmark in the skyline of Knoxville, which I am down for. But again, whether it's a public or private enterprise is the main conversation to have. So I don't know. We talked a little bit as we were getting started. The Knox County city murder rate is through the roof right now, and I have all sorts of guesses and theories on what's going on in the world right now. Obviously, I mean, the easy one is obviously this pandemic and all the different issues that are inside the pandemic are contributing to. But like it's I don't know what, in 2019 we had 20 murders in the year or something like that. And then we had Did you say again?
I don't have the number in front of me, so I can't.
Because I remember reading there was a News Sentinel article a couple weeks ago, Sunday paper. It was like 19 was about 20, 2020 was 37, so it was almost doubled from 19 to 20. And I think we're already looking at a dozen or so this year. And I don't know, like I just don't understand. For me, this is just, I'm literally seeing the reporting and it's like, what is going on kind of thing. And so I don't even know where to start a conversation about it. If you would like to, please go ahead.
I mean, there's multiple factors at work. One of them is what we were just discussing, which is Knoxville's growth. If we're expecting 200,000 people to come into our city over the next 10 years, that means that, we're growing as a city, and we're attracting new people to the city, and some of those are going to be good and some of those are going to be bad. That's one issue. And that was, one item that Chief Thomas kind of emphasized in one of our city council workshops. Obviously, you mentioned the pandemic and the stresses that come from that. We've seen an unnerving increase in domestic violence throughout this pandemic, right? And then, the pressures that come with living in poverty. We've seen, nationwide, I don't know the numbers exactly for Knoxville, but nationwide, we have 120 million people living in poverty. And just in the last year, 8 million more were added. And so, folks are then beginning to engage in, what do you call that? The black market, or the other ways of finding income,
right?
That put people's lives in danger. Multiple pressures on our community. Lack of housing. So people have options to leave unsafe housing and get out on their own. The job options in our community that aren't poverty wages.
Right.
So many things. We have a lot of work to do, not just in our city, but throughout the country. Richest country in the world, we can do better.
I agree. I fully agree with that. It's just, I don't know. Again, like this is a well above my pay grade in understanding. Truly understanding what the problem is and/or solutions. I think personally, I'm pretty pro legalization of most illicit substances, and this being one of the arguments for. You take the black market away, and you take the auxiliary parts of the black market, which is the violence part, out of the equation. Doesn't mean that all the violence goes away, but when you get people, when people can purchase a safe product legally through normal means, it takes away this need for territory fights and it's already illegal. So what's one more thing illegal to do while you're doing it? And so that's a big one for me personally that I've been kind of pushing on. I think to me, this is a state issue. I know it's above the city council, but I know we can do some things locally to pressure the state to maybe move forward.
Yep.
I think full recreational needs to be on the docket yesterday. I've never been a pot smoker. Every time I try, I get sick. I don't enjoy it whatsoever. It's not a personal joy out of me. It's a tax revenues conversation and it's a safety conversation. And those two things are the easiest sales pitch in the world to me specifically for pot. I argue as a libertarian most of the time, so I will go all the way into heroin and everything else too in pro legalization on it, but specifically because to me, I don't want to end up with another lottery situation. The lottery to me was, again, it's one of those inevitabilities, and we drug our feet until we finally got around to it, and we missed all the early entry bonuses. I think Kentucky already has some stuff on. Illinois already has has full recreational. And so as the neighboring states start getting into it, we lose any early entry bonus. And then it becomes, we got to now instead of being ahead of the curve on it. So I don't know. This is one of those, to your understanding, what can we do as a city and county government to try to encourage this conversation moving forward?
Well, we have to talk to our state delegation. The city has a meeting this Friday. So I can bring it up at that Friday meeting. I'm not sure how many allies we have on this issue at the moment. I was happy to see that we're seeing folks on both sides of the aisle pushing this conversation now here in the state. So that's encouraging for the many reasons that you just stated. I agree with all of them. I agree that we could reduce gun violence if we legalize some of these black markets that people are engaging in. And they're engaging in them, and they are lucrative because they represent things that people either need, have become to depend on in terms of pain management. Pain management is a major issue, throughout the country, and for many reasons, maybe diet can help with those things, but a lot of times it's, injuries that folks are dealing with over a long time, et cetera, et cetera. And so we've seen how pill mills have impacted our communities throughout the state. It's become a major moneymaker for some folks. And luckily, we've seen some movement by elected officials to try to rein that in. But, folks are also relying on marijuana. In states where it's legal, it's medicinal marijuana. And so, I think exactly the points that you made are correct. And for both an economic development piece and also to curb some of the violence we see in our communities.
Right, because I skipped one too, is you got an employment conversation in legalization too. I would like to see it as an import-free model where it's production in state, distribution in state, retail in state, and so that every person along that line is a state resident. And there's plenty of it would make plenty of jobs. It doesn't even get like you get into some of the other functions that go along with it as well, because you get into some of the fiber uses and all that stuff. I mean, there's a ton of there's so much economy to it that it's that just that part alone is baffling to me. It just doesn't make sense. Like the history of the legal issues with marijuana just boggles the mind when you go into all the different history parts of it.
I mean, imagine if folks decided tomorrow that we should make alcohol consumption illegal again.
Right.
Oh my goodness, the violence that would ensue, following that because of the black market that would be created. People wouldn't stop drinking. Right. A new market would be developed. And so, we need to have common sense conversations.
I agree with that. Okay, so I went out of order because I did want to go some history on you. As far as you were elected in 2019. We talked about that already, and you kind of hinted where you wanted to get into city as opposed to county. But what got you into politics in the first place? Like, what was your I want to get more involved kind of aha moment?
I had no interest in running for office ever in my life.
That's my favorite answer, by the way.
ever in my life, and don't know if I'll run for another office again. I'm taking it one day at a time, because I am here to do a job, and I want to show up every day ready to do that job and not worried about what I might lose or what opportunities I might miss out on if I don't, quiet my mouth a little bit. But the reason I ran was because I was not seeing folks in office representing me the way I wanted to be represented, asking questions at meetings so that we can get an answer on the record.
Right.
I love how my colleagues like to try to school me during our meetings and suggest that I could have set up a private meeting to get my answers rather than ask them publicly.
Right, but the answers aren't for you. They're your questions, right. But the answers aren't for you. The answers are for me, for lack of a better word.
And we're part-time, members of city council. And so let's say I do that work of gathering the answers. I don't have a platform to reach as many people as a city council meeting.
I don't know. Nobody watches those things. Be real. I mean, I watch those things. Like, oh, here's the sad example. Like, realistically, we did a state of the state show. So we watched Lee do his state of the state speech or whatever, and through the Governor Lee's official state YouTube page, there were 700 people watching.
Oh, wow.
Right. And then we did the review show after the fact, and as of that point, which was like 3 days later, 997. I think I was 990. Our viewing for the recap show when I was, taking clips out and stuff like that was 999. Now, granted, I'm sure it got replayed through some of the actual media outlets and there was more viewership than that. But, anyway, to promote myself in this, anytime you want to get something out, I'll do what I can. We don't have a huge audience, but we're working on it. Because again, I that's the issue to me. That's why I started the show. Same thing. I mean, my story and the story of the show is the same thing that you got into politics for. And I think I got to a point where it's either I want to do this, what I'm doing now, or I'm going to run, because I don't know what's going on. And the normal avenues in front of me don't seem to really paint the picture. I got into what really got me bent out of shape is the Board of Health conversation. And it's not even the Board of Health issue in and of itself that got me into it. That's the only conversation we're having. And so I had Commissioner Beeler on, and I was going through the agenda with him, and there's 50 something items on the agenda. And all I saw on the news this morning was they're voting on the Board of Health again. And it's like, yeah, some of them are, land use stuff, which is kind of boring, but it's not boring when it's your neighbor or right next door to you or something like that. And so, but again, there's tons of different, there's so much stuff going on, and there's so little conversation about any of them except the big options. Now the baseball stadium's a big one. And as much as I'm making fun of that right now, we just did it, and the murder one's a big one, but that's a big one, period. And that one should always be a big one if it's as out of control as it's becoming right now. And so that moves me into one of my next, what do you have going on, or what do you see going on in the city that is that's not getting the attention it deserves, that is happening, but is not, it's not being reported about. Not a lot of people know about it.
Well, one of the big issues that I'm working on right now is our growing homeless population in Knoxville, and our plans for how to address it. And I've not been happy with how we're approaching this issue. And I'm also quite concerned that we are missing out on available federal dollars to address it. And that's one thing I'm quite sensitive to, is when our local government and our state government, refuses to bring in much needed federal dollars for some of our programs. In fact, on the city level, I've heard more of a discussion of whether we should even continue these services. And that's quite disheartening. So I'm planning to take some action this week. You will see more action from me this week.
Okay. Well, because I had Marty on from Care Cuts, and some of her team on, and talked about that. And it's one of the things that, again, this is one of the things that interests me, because I don't know how it works. because we have a number of nonprofit groups that are doing a lot of different stuff. And so I guess the question to be, and maybe you half answered it already because apparently the answer is not much, but what is the program that the city government has, or is it leave it up to the nonprofits, or is there some sort of like partnership between city and some of the nonprofits to do things? Like how is it currently working, and how would you like to see it work, I guess is the question.
Well, there's a lot of, like you said, a lot of small nonprofits that are doing good work in the city. And the city has been hesitant to partner with the small nonprofits. They're primarily working with the larger agencies, and they're all on the same page for what they feel like.
So I'm sorry, quick clarification. What do you mean by the like agencies? Like as far as like law enforcement as opposed to a CARM or something like that?
No, just in terms of when I say agency, I mean that they've almost become these quasi-governmental organizations, even though they are private nonprofit, like CARM. CARM does not receive any local funding, so completely separate from the city, but it is our homeless shelter.
Right.
Right. Salvation Army, VMC, Volunteer Ministry Centers. These agencies that are large enough to get funding on their own and often partner with the city on large projects like supportive housing and those issues. And that's who the city looks to provide housing for homeless folks. We have been having a bit of an argument about the role of these smaller nonprofits that provide some of the day-to-day care, whether it's food delivery, whether it's, there are street medics in Knoxville that are working, providing clothing. We have smaller nonprofits providing, very small amount of shelter for a small amount of folks. They haven't been brought into, I guess what I want to call is the city's continuum of care, or the city's
right. Yeah.
outreach efforts.
Right, because when I was talking to Marty, that's one of the things that kind of popped to me is like talking to her and about the others, but what they're doing with Care Cuts, and then some of the other organizations that she's kind of partnered with, where she gets people in, she gets them cleaned up, and then she figures out what they need, and then kind of helps them push them in the direction or whatever. That it kind of felt to me, and I could be wrong, but it felt to me like there's a good amount of services, maybe not enough. There's a good amount of services available. It's almost a coordination conversation more than it is an availability. And so I don't know, maybe I'm kind of reading too far into this, but it seems to me like one of the issues you're having is that it's almost a management issue, that the city could do a better job managing the organizations that are willing to do the work.
Yeah, helping coordinate their efforts. We have a housing first policy, which is wonderful. Housing first policy says, let's put folks into housing first and then address the issues that cause them to be homeless in the first place, whether it's addiction, mental health, whatever, but get them into housing first. However, there have been some, I guess, disagreements regarding that kind of first step. If the first step for them is they're in a tent on the street, do we just run them off from the tent in the street and tell them, that's illegal, there's no camping in the city, move on, you can go to CARM? And then, if that person says, well, I've been banned from CARM, and I'm not, my background's not Christian, so I can't participate in this program. And I have a criminal background, and so they're not allowing me into this program. What do we do with those folks next? Where do they go? Do we just keep chasing them around the city, pulling out bulldozers and bulldozing? All studies I've read says that's a waste of money. We're just throwing money into the wind, and the problem still remains. In fact, our population of homeless is growing.
Right. They don't just disappear.
Right. They don't disappear. So let's focus on acquiring the housing that we need. We've been focused on affordable housing in Knoxville, and you'll see all of these wonderful numbers about how much we've invested in affordable housing. But what I'm trying to get a breakdown of is how much of that affordable housing was for folks who make 30% or less of the median income, of the average median income. A lot of the projects I've seen come before city council are 60% median income, 80%. The next project at Austin Homes is 100% median income. I don't think folks even realize this. And the idea behind it is, well, if we grow more if we build more housing, that relieves pressure on the low income housing in our community and makes more availability. But if we're expecting 200,000 new people coming into our city,
right, they're going to quickly be eaten up by new people and not getting anybody that's on the street now. That makes sense. Yeah. Because again, like I feel like, this is another one of those issues that I don't even know where to start on. I'm just trying to get a base understanding of how it is to go on to solutions. Like, I'm not even ready for talking. I'm willing to listen to solutions. I'm not trying to say that. I'm just saying, like, for me, it's like I'm just trying to understand where these problems are, what they are, and I think that's a specifically important one, because like you said, we are growing in population, and that population is specifically growing inside of that. And how are we planning for this? One of the things, again, that where the metro thing comes in is that Larson was in here again, and I was talking to him, and we got into this conversation about vision. What is the vision of the city? What is the vision of the county over the next 10 years? If we're getting this population growth, it can't be Band-Aids. We can't do Band-Aids over and over and over again. We've got to have a long-term vision. And then, again, going back to the very beginning of the conversation, how does that relationship with the city and county work when you start talking about long-term projects? The county wants to put, like, I have a very specific, not super big deal situation in my neighborhood, for lack of a better word, where at Ebenezer and North Shore down here in way west, I think it's technically city, part of it's city. This is the weird part, and this is why it's an interesting conversation to have. This is the first in 5 winters that we haven't had a major flood at this intersection. And right now there's a temporary pumping station in to make sure it doesn't flood. And there's plans for, a long-term fix for it, but it becomes this big quagmire of, whether some of it's our city easements, it's a state road, but it's in the county overall. And so, like, we Larson talking about vision and long-term plan sounds great, but how do we rectify that as the multiple governments involved? Is that something that you've seen at all in the city council, in the meetings and anything like that? Well, let me back up. Is there a city long-term vision on paper that exists currently?
Our long-term vision, as far as I understand it, are pretty much captured by our our planning documents, our 1-year reports, our section, our sector plans, our 1-year plans. These are all, they go out the next 10 years to get a sense of what the vision is for the city of Knoxville. In conversations, this is actually another reason why I ran for office. Multiple reasons why I ran for office, but another reason why I ran for office is
it's got to be a lot if it makes you do something you don't want to do. I mean, it makes sense.
Right. I grew up in Knoxville, and I see my beloved city changing. When I was growing up in Knoxville, when I started at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, I was working downtown at the library, going to school, paying my own bills, all of that stuff, and living on a limited income. And I remember at that time having so many options for where I could live while being a student at UT. I lived out west at one point. I lived in the Fort 2 different times. I lived in South Knoxville, rented a house there. And at no time was my rent, of course, this is 20 years ago, but I was making $8.50 an hour at the library. That's still about the same, what people are making now. And my college costs were much lower than they are now. I'm pretty sure it was $2,500 a semester, if that.
All right. So
like
just for clarification, a gentleman never asked a woman her age, but when did you start at UT?
in 97.
Okay. So you're a couple years older than me. I started in 2000. So
Okay.
is it?
So, the wages haven't gone up, but the cost of living has gone up exponentially. Um, I remember I had my roommate in college. She got short on money, had to move out of the dorms. She moved into the Fifth Avenue Motel. That's where she stayed for a little while until she could find a new place, And so now, but anyway, so sorry, that
You're fine.
long-term vision is to limit the houses that you rent now. You make more money on these single family homes. The city makes more money if we can get more houses back on the tax rolls, right? And have more single family homes, and then push the rentals to those main corridors so that we can then have those huge apartment complexes that you can put a whole bunch of people into. Apartment complexes bring in a lot of tax revenue, much more than one singular building. Let's see, what else is being planned? We have all of these ideas for how can we generate income as a city that doesn't raise, people's property taxes. And so that's why there's so much of a focus on these income generating projects. But what that means is we keep putting public funds into these amenities that the public can't necessarily enjoy all the time. We have at Caswell Park baseball, park that stays locked most of the day, and the neighborhood can't enjoy what seems like their neighborhood park,
Right?
Because that's income generating property for the city. So I'm always skeptical when a new income generating property comes along, a project comes along, that the city tries to sell to us as a new public amenity. It's not going to be a new public amenity. It's not going to be, somewhere where folks of all income levels, from the poorest of the poor to the richest of the rich, can go and hang out on a Saturday afternoon and just sit in the bleachers,
Right.
All day. And they're going to clean that mess up every day for free.
Right.
Like that ain't going to happen.
Right. That was the thing. I was watching the baseball meeting on that. They were kept referencing that Indiana ball field where they let people go in there today. It's like, yeah, I guess, but yeah, that's exactly what I thought. It's like, you're gonna how many times does the cleanup crew go in there 2 or 3 hours before a game and clear everybody out because there's an event going on or whatever? How much money does the Boyd and the Smokies group spend on cleaning the field up after public use before they're like, yeah, this isn't okay, we can't continue to do this, or they say you got to start paying for it as a city, county, or something like that? And it's like, well, that was the deal, man. This is what we were supposed to do. You're supposed to give us something that we can play with too when you don't have anything going on.
And all of those other properties, the Chilhowie Park, the Civic Coliseum, we have a private management group that manages those properties. It's not managed by the city. So you have to book it and pay for it, and we pay them to manage those properties.
Yeah, I know that's the other big one to me why I'm against the baseball stadium. If we're going to do a big civic expenditure like that, I think that's the one we need to do better with. The civic's terrible. We need a better civic, because if we want to get concerts and other events and good, fun entertainment things that the community at large can use, and it generates income, blah, 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 and all the different stuff about it, that civic is so hard to do anything in. It's so hard to go and enjoy anything. And hockey's okay in there if you're a hockey fan. But other than that, like, there's no event that really functions well in that space. It's too small to get anything worth coming in. That brings me into a conspiracy kind of thing that I have. I don't like. One of the things that I'm looking forward to as Knoxville grows is the university losing some of its control over how the city and county work around them. It's hard, and this is what scares the crap out of me about the baseball thing. Randy Boyd is the president of the university, and he's trying to put a $65 million project in place. I'm not saying he's doing anything specifically, but it doesn't seem like a stretch to me that he will use some of his university clout to push his point. It concerns me that one individual has this kind of clout as a private businessman, but as well as his state office, for lack of a better word, as the president of the UT. I don't like that. It's a problem for me. I don't know what the solution is. I just like to complain about it, I guess. But yeah,
One thing I wanted to say though, because back to that metro government conversation that I forgot to mention is, there are amenities in the city that folks would be concerned about losing if we went to a metro government. Public transportation is all within the city. What does that look like if we go to metro? My mom, I grew up in the city, right on Shared Road near Baptist Hospital. But then after I graduated, my mom moved from that house and she moved to the county. So she lives in the county and she likes paying for her own trash pickup and, not having that come out of her taxes. And so, I think there's a lot of county residents who would rather, pay those types of expenses themselves and it not be a city or metro service. And so I think it's, kind of those types of arguments we haven't had as a community.
right.
And we'd have
For
before.
sure. Yeah. Because that's one of the things to me is like, oftentimes when I bring it up, everybody goes into whatever model clicks in their head, whether it's the Nashville model or whether it's Cincinnati or like all the different models that have happened. Everybody goes to their individual version in their head. And so it's like, well, this city did it this way and I don't like that. It's like, well, I don't have a proposal. I don't have a specific, this is how we're going to do it. Because I agree. Cause like fire coverage is a specific one. That county has it as a private thing where the city has it as a public offering and different stuff like that. How it would change taxes is an interesting conversation as well. There's a lot of parts to it. I just feel like it's one of those, I feel like it's a conversation we need to start having, maybe not with intent to make it happen, but to start sussing some of these things out, because I think if I understand correctly in Nashville, Nashville has like a subdivision of the metro where some of those trash pickup services and stuff like that are provided in parts of the city, but not in other parts. And that's some of those, I think, Eddie Manis is supposed to get me, he said he had some documentation on when Nashville did it, and he was supposed to send me a copy of it that kind of broke some of this stuff down just to kind of give me a model to kind of see, like, because again, for me, not knowing all the different things, like I've been on a kick recently with commission and trying to figure out how many boards and bodies that the commission oversees, and the city website's much better about it. It's on the website. The county one doesn't do as well at it. And so I'm trying to figure it out. And so the first version I got sent was I can't remember exactly, the secretary for the commission sent it to me, and I can't remember exactly how she worded it, but essentially it was this is the ones that it was like a list of 30, but it was ones that didn't include commissioners as the chairs. These were some of the more peripheral ones, and I was like, please send me the ones with the commission or the ones that run through the mayor's office as well. So my guess is we're looking at like 50 or 60 in the county. I don't recall how many are in the city. It's like there's a lot of people doing a lot of stuff on my behalf as a resident that I don't know who they are or what they're doing. And I'm assuming that I'm normal in that because I had, Terry Hill, who is on the county committee on committees. Like they have a commission to look over all the different commissions and boards because there's that many. And, I was talking to her about it. She was not complaining, maybe not be the right word, but there's a lot of them that are in the charter that have to be there because the charter says so. There are a lot of them that are state mandates that have to be there for state mandates. But I don't think anybody the Board of Health being an easy one. That's a state mandated thing. Whether it should or shouldn't exist is part of the conversation, not for right now for me, but is, who manages these kind of things and who oversees them is one of the questions. Because, again, I went on a long kick because I was incorrect about the sheriff's office buying a drone, which is a false statement. I apologize to the listeners that I went through that with. But, as far as I understand it, the sheriff's office answers to the state, not county commission. KPD again, this is just me trying to understand things. I don't know how it works, and I don't think anybody else does. So this is where I get buried.
One thing it's kind of like with the federal government. There are certain things that the federal government wants states or cities to do, but they don't really have the authority to say y'all have to do this. But what they do is say, if you want this money, right, you'll do it. right?
Right.
And
All these
uh,
grants, right? All these
right.
grants that sound like free money, but they're never free
Yeah.
money.
So time after time, we're like, okay, well, we got to do that because we want them federal dollars. How is that any different than our sheriff's department?
Right.
Uh, right. Like if they want money from the county, it seems the county could have some influence over them, even if the county does not have the authority to change the sheriff's policy,
Right.
or
Yeah, I hear what you're saying for sure.
there might be some limitations, but say they don't answer to the county, but only to the state. They anybody who pulls purse strings got some power.
Right. But it seems, I don't know. It seems to me, at least historically speaking, that more or less the both the school board and the sheriff's office, they present their annual budget, and that's about all the conversation is. As long as they stay in budget. I don't know. We'll have to see. Some of the budgetary stuff's coming up, so we'll kind of see how.
And when Burchett was county mayor, he had an agreement with the superintendent, an MOU in place for like a 5-year term that said the school board would only bring forward a balanced budget. They would not ask for more money than the what do you call it? The state, not BEP.
Yeah, BEP.
Basically, yeah, no more than what the state BEP was projecting. Yada yada yada. And so that's become the culture between school board and county commission, is that school board is going to bring, projections within the BEP projections and not above it, not asking county to, really take from additional county funds to meet that request. Right. So it's just become culture, right. But they can certainly ask for more.
Right. And and again, it's interesting. That one specifically is very interesting to me that I never paid attention to. And I don't think even people that kind of auxiliary pay attention to is the relationship of the school board to the county. I don't think people realize how autonomous they really are. And again, this is one of the things that frustrates me in trying to follow politics locally is that I can't think of anybody that I interviewed in, during campaign season that didn't mention about how they care about schools and stuff like that. And the more I thought about it, there was like, well, how much can you do? In county, a county commissioner can't do a lot for the schools. It's just not in the job title, but they still run on it. And that's one of the things that dove me further into doing this, is because it's like, it's not a lie per se, but it's a little bit misleading to say that I'm going to do everything I can for the schools. Well, okay. The thing you can do is about nothing. That's just the position,
right.
And so like, I think one of the things that we as voters fail at miserably is understanding what your guys' jobs are. And again, this is what I'm trying to chase. So, to shift into, since I brought up, campaigning and stuff, how long is the city term?
4 years.
4 years. So you're not going into election cycle this year. We got what, 5 on election this year?
Yep.
And I've got Mr. Smith coming in later today, and he was an appointment. And so do you know if I'll ask him about it. Never mind. Don't worry about that question. I don't know. So like I said, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to understand what your job is. And then I'm trying to understand what we are missing in lack of coverage. Those are my two major, my major goal. I mean, I have opinions. I think I'm smart. I don't think I'm smart. I always that's my running joke. I know I'm not that smart. I'm assuming that I'm average or below. I'm dumb enough to do this and sound stupid in front of people. That's really my key win, I think, is that I think a lot of people have the same questions I have about what you guys are doing, what you're supposed to be doing, how this thing works. And I think most general media assumes we know more than we do, or has an agenda on what they're telling us, as opposed to just telling us what's going on. And so that's what I'm after. And so, again, the floor is yours. If you have anything, the homeless population thing we talked about, the murder rates we talked about baseball,
you brought up a drone that you thought was bought last week. But it wasn't.
I know KPD has at least one.
Yes.
At least.
And yes. I've also found out that KPD requested access to um, the Ring doorbell video footage last year. So that was one thing I wanted to announce, since it seems to be a topic of interest to you and maybe your audience. But I'm planning to bring forward an ordinance before City Council soon, that requests information on any surveillance equipment or software that KPD is using, and asking them to come before City Council before any changes are made to policies or any new surveillance activities are implemented. Because I want to have a better sense of how are they using this Ring doorbell video footage, and
Yeah,
what
that's
are they
not.
doing with
Yeah, if it's not permission of the owner of the Ring doorbell, I have a problem with that a lot. Yeah, we did a whole Fourth Amendment episode with a lawyer buddy of mine trying to understand what the Fourth Amendment used to mean against what it means nowadays. Like, and
yeah.
again, that like another one of the guys, one of my buddies that does the show with me, like he put it better. It's like this drone conversation. Don't talk of it like a drone. Talk of it as surveillance. It's a surveillance conversation, not a drone conversation. And again, Massey's introduced a bill in the state to change how law enforcement is allowed to use drones. And I don't know how they're allowed to use them now, so I don't know what the adjustments mean realistically.
Right.
But again, it's that's one of those things that I think people are too easy to say, well, it's for safety, and it's like it might be, but it's also my business. It's none of your business. I choose to share in the public. If I'm in the public, I get that kind of argument. But yeah, it scares the crap out of me, because this is one of those things that it just seems it's taking another inch, taking another inch, taking another inch.
Mm-hmm.
And we look, I mean, like, again, you were talking about going to school at UT. It's like late 90s. There's a whole bunch of different stuff. Like this is pre 9/11, so we don't have Patriot Act conversation.
Yep.
We have a guy like Snowden that comes out and says, yeah, they're spying on you.
Yep.
They absolutely are. And everybody's like, that guy's crazy. It's like, no, we're crazy to think that guy's crazy. This is a big deal. Yeah. And for whatever reason, it's not popular to say, no, it's none of your business. Just say, I mean, that's it's really that simple. It doesn't, I don't know, because eventually the law changed behind it. Because again, that's another one of the issues to me. There's so many laws on the books, and especially going through the different layers of government that we live in, to assume that a surveillance state that's that good at it doesn't pick out a law that you don't know exists and decides that now's the time to get on that for whatever reason, just seems inevitable to me. And so that's why it's like, well, we'll start with privacy, and then we'll go back into let's get some of this stuff off the books. From I believe the city of Knoxville still has an ordinance where you can't spit on the sidewalk.
Really?
I'm pretty sure. Like, I was going through, I was on a website looking at like just stupid laws that exist. I think it's somewhere in Florida you're not allowed to tie your alligator to the horse post. So when you ride your alligator into town, you can't tie it on the post where people tie their horses, because the alligator will eat the horse, I guess. I don't know. But stuff like that exists. And it's like, I don't know that there's ever been a concerted effort to go back and clean up the history of things and kind of, take some of that old weird stuff off the books.
Yeah, I don't think so. It's a really good point.
Yeah. So I don't know. Any last things? Any specific? I think.
No,
I think that KPD conversation is a good one to have. I look forward to hearing more about that as it goes, because I think law enforcement just tends to say, okay, if I can access it, I'm going to use it, and it's like nobody's like, hey, hold on, whether you can or can't doesn't the should or shouldn't should be the conversation, not can or can't.
Right.
Okay. Yep. Well, cool. Well, I appreciate you. Like I said, you were welcome to reach out to me anytime. I'm glad to do it. This has become the most this is my favorite thing to do. I love doing these shows. I have a good time.
So much. Just like you said, folks are not necessarily watching the meeting. The analysis we get from the media following a meeting is limited. Folks need a conversation about what's happening in their local government beyond the headlines. So I appreciate you doing this, and I'm happy to come back anytime.
All right. Well, I will reach out and go from there. Do you want to plug any of your contact links for residents to get a hold of you or anything, or do you want me to just put your city email in the notes or anything like that?
Folks can get in touch with me in multiple ways. A lot of folks call me, and you're welcome to call me at my home. It's 865-851-8561. And I'm on social media. I cannot remember what my handle is, so
I'll look it up and I'll put it in the links for you. No problem. But when you were reaching out to Miss Parker on official city business, please refer to her as Councilwoman so that she knows that's what you're after. We talked about that in the pre-show. Just helps her make it straight on whether it's somebody she knows personally or somebody that's contacting her for city purposes.
All right, let me keep it professional.
Right, trying to sound like we're doing something serious here. Councilwoman Parker, I appreciate you so much for coming on. And again, please feel free to reach out anytime, and I'll get in touch with you as interesting stories pop up. But that's it for us here. Outro music. Councilperson Parker, everybody. That was exciting. It was fun. It was informative. A lot of different stuff that I haven't considered. As I've mentioned a few times, I am a county resident, although I might as well be a city resident for how close I am. And so this is my first jump into city stuff. So again, what we're after here is trying to understand, trying to learn things, trying to figure out how things work and who does what where and who to get in touch with when you have problems with that kind of thing. So I'm going to keep working on it. Like I said, I've got a Councilman Smith coming in this afternoon. I've got SEMA tomorrow. We're almost in agreement, almostagreement@gmail.com, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Give us a like and share. Tell your friends about us. The point here is to help you guys understand what's going on around you in a long form so that you can actually get some depth to it instead of, like Miss Parker said, there's more than just the headline. So stay in touch, reach out, and we'll do what we can.